Hey guys, and welcome back to the ASX Investor channel, and welcome to another CEO interview. We all know about the excitement surrounding the EV battery material space. We know there's been a significant pickup in the EV adoption around the world. And of course, there's many different components that will feed into that broader supply chain. Today, we'll be diving into the Renascor Resources story. ASX RNU is developing a vertically integrated graphite project, really leveraging their Siviour project, but also going all the way into downstream and developing out Purified Spherical Graphite, which will go into the lithium-ion batteries. It's a fascinating project. It's located within Australia. There's been a lot of excitement surrounding ASX RNU. And today, we're welcoming the CEO, David Christensen, to the channel. David, welcome. It's been a fascinating past period for Renascor, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it all with you.
Oh, great. Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so exciting to have you here. There's been so much excitement from the audience as well to hear about Renascor. There's been so many significant announcements, which of course we'll unpack into, but I'd love maybe with that initial overview, who is Renascor and what is actually the opportunity that you're trying to feed into with the Siviour resource?
Yeah, thanks very much. So we're an Adelaide-based exploration and development company that's now in the clean energy space with the discovery of really a major graphite project located right here in South Australia. Our Siviour deposit's grown into one of the largest graphite resources in the world. And for us, it hasn't been a very quick story. We've been working on this for the better part of the 5 years, both in improving up the resource and also, amongst other things, developing a advanced processing technology that in an environmentally friendly way can produce a refined graphite product for direct use in the manufacture of lithium-ion battery anodes. I think in the EV space, we've all seen some of the excitement that's around a number of the battery minerals. Graphite was maybe the first one to take off many years ago, but it's been difficult to find the right way to sort of leverage into the EV sector. We think that that's about to happen with graphite, and we're going to see some of the same changes that we're seeing now in the lithium sector. That's going to happen with graphite, and we think we're particularly well placed to do that, largely because of two reasons. The first is just the scale and the quality of the Siviour resource, and the second is the fact that we have the and quality in a low sovereign risk industrial jurisdiction like Australia. And that's going to permit us to produce the refined graphite product, deliver it direct to the lithium-ion battery sector. And we think we're going to be able to do that at amongst the leading cost of any new graphite development globally. And maybe more to the point, our real goal is to be the lowest cost producer outside of China. And that in turn, we think is going to give us an opportunity to develop one of, if not the largest, graphite projects globally.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. And maybe even taking that step back, of course, everybody, when they think about EVs and the next generation batteries, they think about lithium, as you mentioned, but graphite's such a key component towards these batteries with the anode. What's interesting, actually, I heard you previously speak, and graphite's number one use case at this stage isn't actually for the EVs, but over time, it's going to really develop into that. Would love just to hear your thoughts about the current state of graphite at the moment and why your purified spherical graphite is going to be so important moving into the supply chain.
Yeah, so graphite has traditionally been an industrial mineral. It's used largely in the manufacture of steel and refractories, foundries, crucibles. And traditionally, this has been a good market, but it's been a slow growth market. The EV space, I think, as all of us know, is a real booming market, and it's growing from the top down with increased take up in EV and then lithium-ion batteries, and then the component parts of the batteries like the anode and then the graphite. But for graphite, it's been a slower transition than for some other minerals, but that's starting to change. And so if we look at sort of the use, right now we're maybe a bit less than a quarter of all graphite is going into lithium-ion battery applications. By the end of the decade, however, that's changing. And it's this transition that I think is the real opportunity in the sector. And our strategy as a company is to try to leverage into that EV space. And as you mentioned, we're vertically integrated, right? So we have both the graphite mine, but then we have the downstream to create purified spherical graphite. And that allows us to get the 100% exposure to that high growth area. And I think that's what's causing, some of the excitement in the sector is the fact that this is potentially a way to leverage into that growth sector. And we think that that's the opportunity, and it's starting to to really come up when we're seeing the anode manufacturers are now coming to us and they're wanting more product. And that's the key thing that's going to get us to take off. I think we've seen with graphite and really all the battery minerals, if you're not going to trade it on a quoted exchange, you need to have the offtake contracts come to you. And that's starting to happen in the sector now. And so that's really exciting. That's what's going to give us an opportunity to transition this from what looks like on paper a great development into an active operation for many years to come.
And that all leads us, of course, onto Siviour, the world's largest graphite reserve outside of Africa. There's a few key competitive advantages. Of course, it's a tier 1 jurisdiction because of the ore body, low cost as well. Love to just hear your thoughts on what is that development from mine to manufacturing, and why is Siviour standing out as a resource and opportunity for you?
So graphite as a mineral is always been easy to find. The difficulty is finding it in a concentration that's large enough so you can economically extract it. And with any new project, you're going to have to meet not just your cost of operation, but you're going to have to justify the capital cost, right? So you need an economy of scale. And this is where I think that Siviour has an advantage, because it's a big ore body. Not only big, it's massive, but it's one large ore body. It's big, it's flat, it's near surface. That's relatively unique. And so that allows us to create a graphite concentrate at a low cost. And so that's good. But then if we go downstream, that allows us to move into the lithium-ion battery sector. It allows us to capture a better margin. And it also allows us to capture probably a more bankable offtake base that's going to allow us to meet the economy of scale to raise the construction capital. And the real advantage is quite simple. The single largest component cost in the production of purified spherical graphite is the feedstock itself. So if we're able to manage the risk at the mine site, deliver that graphite concentrate at the mine at a low cost, we pass that cost savings on to the downstream, and that gives us the competitive advantage in producing purified spherical graphite, we believe.
And it's a really fascinating one. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on the current state of play as well. We know that the majority of anode manufacturing at the moment is done in Asia, with China taking the bulk of it. We, of course, know there's a focus on building resilience into supply chains. So Siviour has that opportunity to really feed into that, while, of course, having the close proximity to Asia. So can you talk about those end users, the anode manufacturers, and how the take-up's been so far?
Yeah, so this market it isn't just predominantly Asian. It's 100% Northeast Asian, right? So you have China, 85% of the market and 90% of the growth. And then you have South Korea and Japan. And out of the top 50 anode manufacturers globally who are making natural flake anodes, not a single one of them have even announced plans to yet move into the US and in Europe. It's going to happen. It has to happen. But for now, that market's centered on Northeast Asia. And I guess our strategy as the company is to focus on the leading anode manufacturers wherever they are. They're there now. Now they'll be moving eventually, and when they do, we want to be a supplier of them. But for now, that's where they are. So the market is Northeast Asian in focused, and we've been trying to move into that market for several years now. We actually initially tried it with graphite concentrates, and then it became clear to us that going downstream was the way to go. And so a lot of those early connections we made were quite helpful. And then the market has sort of moved forward quite quickly. So for us as a company, COVID happened and the market was relatively weak, except in China. In China, it was very strong, and we got our first offtake agreement in China in late 2020. And then that leveraged us into another agreement in China in 2021. And then we brought on a Japanese partner in 2021. And then later it was POSCO coming on board. And so the market sort of has caught up outside of China, in particular in South Korea, who are quite aggressive in their anode expansion plans. And Japan's starting to do that soon. It's been a bit slower, but that market is really Northeast Asian in focus for now, and it'll move. And I guess our strategy as a company is we want to be aligned and we want to be ready to move. The other thing to keep in mind is we don't want to wait. We want to get into production as quickly as possible. We want to build this. We want to have a first mover advantage. And so what we want to do is we want to align where that volume is. And the volume is currently coming out of Northeast Asia. And when it moves into Europe and the United States, we think we're going to be very well poised to do that because we'll have the existing supply channel set up.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And we know that for early stage developers, of course, each offtake goes some way to de-risking the actual project itself. Would love to just hear some thoughts on 4 offtakes at the moment. Of course, POSCO was one that really attracted a lot of the market's attention, a true global conglomerate. Love to just hear your thoughts on how those discussions are playing out and to provide some overview to the viewers about the context of those actual offtakes.
Yeah, so again, it started with China, where the world, I think, all took a bit of a pause during COVID, especially at the early part of 2020. And this impacted, of course, Japan and South Korea as well. But we moved forward in China. And so we were able to make some initial inroads in getting our product, sending it, having it tested, and we were able to get that first offtake in 2020 in China. In 2021 was sort of a bit of a game changer in some of the public policy announcements towards EV, which happened during 2020, started to play out in the mineral space, right? And we saw this not only in graphite, but the other battery minerals. And for us, that really opened up other markets as well. So it opened us up to other companies within China, but then also Japan and South Korea opened up. And the expansion plans we're seeing are really what's falling down from the public policy, not just in Northeast Asia, but rest of the world, about who's going to provide the EVs, who's going to provide the lithium-ion battery. And as we go further upstream to get where we are, what's happened now is it's really creating a nice storm of demand in what's traditionally been a buyer's market is starting to worry about security of supply, right? So we're seeing this even in China, where China has 100% of the downstream capacity to do purified spherical graphite. They create 2/3 of the graphite concentrate, yet they're net importers of the product now. And to put this in context, it takes, I think in the West, something maybe 2.5 years to build a gigafactory. It takes a lot longer to get a graphite mine going. And so what we're likely to see is, if you look forward with some of the expansion demands, you're seeing the supply grow greater than the demand. And that's what's giving rise to companies like POSCO, for instance, who have very aggressive growth plans, knowing that they're going to need additional sources of supply, not just in China, but outside of China. And I think that's why we were able to conclude a non-binding offtake agreement with them.
As you've said, the demand is here now, but it's only going to continue to grow. So of course, as mentioned, the focus is going to be bringing production online as soon as possible. Would love to just hear those thoughts. DFS is finished in 2019, moving towards that final investment decision up ahead next year. What's the timelines? Of course, there's been discussions about expansion as well. And what are the plans moving forward for Renascor?
Yeah, so our timelines, we basically have 3 streams of work we need to conclude. On the regulatory side, we need to get our final approvals for both the upstream and the downstream. We recently filed our PEPA, which is the second stage in South Australia for the upstream, for the mine site. We're in the final stages of a site selection, and we'll have to go through an approvals process in the downstream as well. On the technical side, we need to do more advanced engineering work, and we'll also have to update the 2019 study. Now, as you mentioned, the other issue is the potential expansion in terms of scale. And when we created our initial production goal of 28,000 tons of purified spherical graphite, that was in the midpoint of 2020. And it looked like a bit of a stretch goal. It looked like it was going to be really hard to place 28,000 tons. But fast forward, what are we, 18 months on now, and it looks quite different. So we have, POSCO alone is looking at taking up to 30,000 tons. We have up to 30,000 tons with the other partners. And so that gives us the potential to expand either in an expansion for stage 1 or stage 2, which is really exciting. And how we decide on that is determined by a number of factors, including how quickly we can progress towards binding offtake, which I know everyone's excited to hear. We're excited for that as well. And so what we'll need to do is we'll need to tick off the rest of that technical and regulatory work, and then move through the offtake stages. And so our timetable is we want to be into a final investment decision by next year. And again, 12 months ago, that looked like a bit of a stretch goal, but with the way the market's moving now, it looks like it's achievable. Exactly when and what month that's going to happen, we're not quite sure. It's going to depend on how quickly we can move into the binding stage. and on whether what we expand in that initial phase, or we wait for a stage 2. And so these are the decisions. But generally speaking, I think the way it's looking now is we think it's really reasonable to think we'll be completing that work, and then next year we can move into final investment decision, and then look to start construction.
It's always exciting, and I'm sure investors will be happy to hear that. Of course, you're already oversubscribed at the moment for the 28,000 tonnes per annum, but there's significant demand. Is it likely to assume that there could be potential other offtakes with new partners as well coming up in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think the way the market's moving right now, that's definitely the case. Now, whether that fits in with a stage 1 or stage 2 is sort of to be determined. I mean, with 28,000 tons with our current stage 1, one company like POSCO alone could take up the whole portion of it. On the other hand, having a bit of competitive tension amongst our offtake partners is probably a good thing for us. And if anything, with the passage of the weeks and the months, what we're seeing is the market itself is only looking stronger, and we're expecting to see what's traditionally been a buyer's market for our commodity is starting to change, and as you can imagine, that's pretty exciting from our standpoint.
And I have to ask you as well, I know, of course, there's so much going on within the business, but as the leader of the company, how much time are you paying attention to the share price? You're up 1,000% over the past 12 months, 75% just over the past 3 months as well. It's been a phenomenal period for ASX RNU as well as the broader EV battery mineral space. What are your general reflections and thoughts on it all?
Yeah, look, you can't get too involved in that on a daily basis, partially because sometimes the daily fluctuations aren't necessarily related to what we're doing. It's important though, because we'll be looking to raise a portion of debt and equity funding in all likelihood for the construction capital. So we need to get our share price up. We have a number of shareholders who've been with us for a long time. Obviously it makes us feel good to see them happy with the share price going up. But that's probably less relevant from a daily basis. I think it's more reflective of we've managed to get a bit of a re-rating that looks at this project as being potentially interesting in the space. I think that the most likely thing that's going to see a push in that share price again is what's happening in the graphite market more generally. And then from our perspective, we'll be de-risking it moving along. And so if we sort of look to the future, we've all seen what's happened in the lithium space right now. The price is starting to go crazy for lithium, and then that pushes all the lithium equities up. This hasn't happened yet in graphite. The graphite price has been relatively stable. There are some signs that's starting to change, but that's the sort of thing that can push us forward even further. And then if we're successful with the rest of our work, it becomes relatively easy from this stage, provided we can just keep our nose to the grindstone and working pretty hard.
It seems like you guys have been working hard, so we'll continue to watch where you're moving forward ahead to as well. For those longer term shareholders who have been following ASX RNU for a while, those prospective shareholders who might be looking at Renascor now, did you have any final reflections that you wanted to share with them?
I think that the final reflection is where we sit in the market is we think we're going to be a tier 1 cost provider, producing an ethically sourced material from a low sovereign risk jurisdiction, and this is going to matter. This is going to be quite important. And these two things together are global competitiveness and leading ESG credentials are going to be critical to get us up and going and being a key provider in the EV mineral space. And what I'd encourage people to do is just take a close look at us. And we think what we offer is relatively low risk from a technical standpoint, but a competitive advantage in terms of price. And then we haven't touched too much on the ESG credentials of what we're doing. But we think we're a real leader in the sector, and part of that is just because where we're located here we're in South Australia, but the same would be true of any Australian jurisdiction, where compliance with strict environmental laws isn't an option. It's the law, and we take this very seriously. But these two things together, being a tier 1 cost producer and then having leading ESG credentials, we think give us considerable upside moving forward.
It's a fascinating story. That is Renascor Resources. It's ASX RNU. If you guys did enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Feel free to share it out. We make daily videos, so welcome if you're new. Make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on. David, it was an absolute pleasure catching up. I know that the viewers have been excited to hear about this, and so I'm sure they will enjoy hearing more about the Renascor story. Thank you so much for joining us on the channel.
Great. It was a real pleasure. Thanks again.